Kia ora, everybody. I'm going to give us a few minutes to let a few people jump on in.
Oh, fuck.
All right?
Yeah. Missions, man. Oh, shit.
I'm live, by the way. People are just coming on board now.
Okay.
I haven't told them who my special guests are.
Oh, you got tara masala. Tara masala.
Tara masalata.
Tara masala. Oh, hello.
All right. Hi, Tony. Kia ora. Welcome to the reading Nook. Kia ora, everybody that's jumped on board. We've got a special night tonight. We have some special guests, some of whom might even jump on in a little bit to share. I don't know what they're going to share. I'll just put them on the spot. But tonight's reading is from Honani K. Trask. Amazing. Toa wahine no Hawaii.
Me too.
Have you?
Yes.
If you're going to talk to me, you have to jump in front of the camera because people are listening. Come here.
Hang on, I'm making us a cocktail. Do you want to jump?
Yeah, I do want to jump. Yeah. We got a few sisters in the house, a few other aunties in the house. We got a lot of East Coast aunties in the house tonight. What's that beeping?
Sorry, it's here. It's all good.
Okay, bye. Got a few East Coast aunties in the house tonight who are going to join us in a little bit. So tonight's kōrero is from Honani K. Trask, amazing toa wahine, inspirational speaker, unapologetic champion of her people, Kanaka Māori people, and of Ngāuri Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, leader in her field, political firebrand, amazing wahine. So the book is from a native daughter. If you haven't got this book, this is a must-have in the library. Fantastic book. And we're reading from, if you have the book handy, page 17, Politics in the Pacific Islands, Imperialism and Native Self-Determination. For a dozen millennia, the vast Pacific has been home to a diverse humanity only recently grouped by Western scholars as Micronesia, Polynesia, and Melanesia. Since the dawn of the nuclear age, however, the Pacific has come to be known primarily by its surrounding rim countries, Asian, American, and the former Soviet states. For the first world, the Pacific archipelagos are filled with tiny fantasy islands, more reflective of a state of mind than an actual geographic and cultural place. This view, of course, is rejected by Pacific Islanders themselves, since the Pacific is their ancestral ocean, but lately invaded by colonial powers. As Indigenous peoples, Pacific Islanders have been struggling against imperialism for nearly 300 years. Indeed, imperialism is the key here. Since this word, like racism and genocide, appears to have passed from the scholarly canon, I want to underscore my definition and use of it. For people who suffer the yoke of imperialism, it is a total system of foreign power in which another culture, people, and way of life penetrate transform, and come to define the colonized society. The results are always destructive, no matter the praises sung by the colonizer. But the extent of the damage depends on the size of the colony, the power of the colonizing country, and the resistance of the colonized. In the Pacific, tiny islands, large predatory powers such as the United States, France, Indonesia, and small native populations all but ensure a colonial stranglehold. Of course, the function of imperialism is exploitation of the colony, its lands and oceans, labor, women, and in the Pacific, its mythic meaning as a South Sea paradise. Moreover, any material aid to the colonies is an extension of exploitation given to strengthen the economic dependency that binds colony to colonizer. Just as teaching natives to speak English, watch television, and consume alcohol creates a clever web of psychological dependency from which the colonized find it nearly impossible to disentangle. Generations become addicted to the worst cultural habits of the colonial society, which increases both ignorance of and alienation from the native culture. Indeed, cultural hegemony is the cutting edge of the imperial enterprise, which explains why cultural nationalism becomes such a crucial native strategy in the battle for decolonization. In Hawaii and Aotearoa, for example, teaching the native languages in immersion schools has been at the forefront of a cultural resurgence that also includes reclaiming ancestral lands and moving towards various forms of self-government. In situations such as these, language instruction is understood to be both a cultural and a political assertion. Cultural, because it seeks to preserve the core of a way of thinking and being that is uniquely native, and political, because this attempt at preservation takes place in a system where the dominant group has employed legal and social means to deny the use and inheritance of the native language by natives themselves. I'm going to stop there for a second because I want to reflect on a kōrero that I had just a week before last with Manawana Jackson. He does this thing from time to time, for those that know him, where you think you understand the world and he'll say something and turn the world a little bit upside down. And what you thought was the case is not actually the case. And he usually does it around language. And in the chat we were having, he said, I was talking about the New Conservative Party. We were talking politics, as we usually do. And I mentioned the New Conservative Party. He said, actually, you know, Tina, I've always considered you quite conservative. And I was hurt. I was hurt. And I said, I was like, okay, all right. How do you figure that? He said, well, it's all right because I am too. I went, well, that does actually make me feel better. And he said, you know, conservatives, when we think about, you know, where we've come from and where we come from and who we come from, these people with their new ways of thinking and doing, the colonial ways of thinking and doing, they're actually quite new and radical when you consider what the ways and these ways of this land were. And so that's some of the things that you fight to protect. Those are some of the things that you fight to conserve. So I consider you conservative because you're conserving the ways of our ancestors and our rights. And I was like, I guess I am conservative. I'm all right to be conservative if he's conservative with me. But yeah, I never considered myself conservative towards that. But just made me reflect on that statement where, you know, these political shush. no. You're right though. Yeah, it just made me think about that, about, the way in which language changes things, and the way that we center our language changes how we view the world. Anyway, getting back to this, an ideology of racism justifies the denial of native culture with blanket claims such as natives have no culture, compared to the hegemonic one, or even a valuable culture beyond mere ornamentation. This is especially true in Hawaii, where mass tourism thrives on the commercialization of every aspect of Hawaiian culture. Indeed, one result of commercialization is a widely held belief that Hawaiian culture, including the hula, Hawaiian values of generosity and love, such as aloha, and the Hawaiian extended family, is particularly suited to the visitor industry, which in turn encourages and preserves Hawaiian culture. The truth, though, is the opposite. The myth of happy Hawaiians waiting to share their culture with tourists was invented to lure visitors and to disparage native resistance to the tourist industry. And I'm just going to pause again, because that, one of the really powerful things that I think that I draw from Haunani Trask is the way in which colonizers, particularly in Te Moana Nui a Kua, have painted us and characterized us as these, as people who are here to host others. There's one of my special guests. That we're here to show aroha, or as she's saying, aloha, that we're here to manaki. And of course, the tikanga of aroha and manaki is really important to us, but that's often just what's expected of us, and there's great power in the word no, and we don't use that power very often, and we're often expected to just say yes all the time, and to show aroha all the time, and to manaki all the time, to the point where we're not actually showing aroha or manaki to our loved ones or to our people. Thank you, sister. Tēnā koe me tō manaki tana. Mairi ora. Oh, lovely. There was another one of my special guests. Hey. Come here. Here's another one of my special guests, my beloved sister.
Kia ora.
Kui. Tēnā kōrua. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. E hui hui mai nei I runga I te rorohiko.
Thank you, Aunty Tui. Tēnā koe, Aunty Tui. Hey. Where are we? Behind this crude type of racism are other subtler kinds of responses to native cultural assertion premised on racist beliefs that natives do not understand or know their culture well enough to assert it. Therefore, the reasoning is that they are arguing for something devised on the spot, or in an even more malevolent fashion, they are asserting something political, not cultural. Examples of this include accusations by anthropologists and other alleged experts that native nationalists invent cultural traditions for purely political ends, or that the culture they practice is not authentic. I want to read that again. Examples of this, because this is important. Examples of this include accusations by anthropologists and other alleged experts that native nationalists invent cultural traditions for purely political ends, or that the culture they practice is not authentic. Beware, particularly Pākehā anthropologists who consider themselves to be experts on what is authentic culture. when they're not members of that culture. That's all I'm going to say to that. Because of, oh, lovely. Oh, manakitanga. Oh, my goodness. Thank you. You're just having some boo-boos, Whānau.
Do you want to dip
It's some
it in the soy
special.
sauce?
I do want to dip it in some soy sauce. Thank you. That was another one of my special guests. You just saw a glimpse of her in manakitanga mode.
Hello.
And
Yeah.
another beloved sister, Kalomila.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Male.
Maluele. And so I'm going to bring them back in a little bit after we've finished our kōrero. Yes, that's right. We were up to talking about experts, outside experts on what it is to be authentic in your culture. Because of colonization, the question of who defines what is native and even who is defined as native has been taken away from native peoples by Western trained scholars, government officials, and other technicians. This theft in itself testifies to the pervasive power of colonialism and explains why self-identity by natives of who and what they are elicits such strenuous and sometimes vicious denials by the dominant culture. Very important, very important. I'm going to skip forward a little bit now. Despite its obvious presence, cultural nationalism is not the only arena of resistance or even the most visible one in the Pacific. First world militarization of the region is more contested since the Pacific evolved from a strange place with a few watering ports and frontier outposts in the 18th and 19th centuries into a strategic area for superpower, nuclear politics, ocean and land mining, and first world dumping in the 20th century. In the last 10 years, another threat has evolved from the South Sea paradise myth. Mass-based corporate tourism and its demand for lush islands and prurient exotica. The seeming contradiction of this first world policy of poisoning Pacific islands whilst using them as vacation destinations is explained by the utter arrogance of the imperialist nations. Without doubt, Euro-Americans and non-nuclear Japanese see islanders as racially and culturally inferior. To the predators, the Pacific is vast and far away from the centers of civilization, rendering it most suitable for dangerous projects such as nuclear testing and storage of weapons and romantic holidays. The sheer stupidity of nuclearization in the Pacific or anywhere is lost on colonial nations such as the United States and France because of their belief in their own superiority, which translates into a sense of smug invincibility.
True.
Isn't it? Tautoko, yes. To the holy world, Euro-American civilization will triumph over every difficulty, even nuclear holocaust. The absurd political position called nuclear survivability is the result. Here, for example, is a typical enunciation of its appalling posture towards mass death. The worst case scenarios of hundreds of millions of dead and widespread destruction would be an unprecedented global calamity, but not necessarily the end of history. One of the most important continuities of the nuclear era is that wars can still be fought, terminated, and survived. Some countries will win a nuclear conflict and others will lose. And it is even possible that some nuclear wars may untimely have positive results as World War II did. Reconstruction will begin, life will continue, and most survivors will not envy the dead. Opposition to that madness across national and cultural boundaries has been strong and articulate amongst Pacific Islanders. That was a quote, by the way, from That was a colonizer's quote. Opposition to that madness across national and cultural boundaries has been strong and articulate amongst Pacific Islanders. Thus, there has been organized diplomatic and popular resistance to nuclearization, especially the testing and transport of weapons. How could I even go one word more without acknowledging our whānau who are resisting RIMPAC right now? And, we need to actually shut RIMPAC down. We've been working to get awareness to RIMPAC, the naval exercise that's playing out off the coastline and in the high seas of Hawaii. I think 70 different, how many? No, anyway, a range of different nations from around the world, dozens of different nations from around the world are sending their navies to the high seas off Hawaii to train and detonate weapons, devastate marine environments. And of course, this is in a COVID context as well, and many of them are coming on shore at COVID, 70,000 troops or something like that. So I just wanted to acknowledge the ongoing work of our whānau and the RIMPAC resistance. We are in solidarity with you all. Regional support of independence movements in New Caledonia, Kanaki, West Papua, East Timor, Palau, and Tahiti. Scrutiny of foreign exploitation of resources in the region, significantly through drift netting, fisheries, mines, resort development, and increasing fear of foreign cultural dominance that threatens commercialization and eventual loss of native culture. When viewed through islands rather than the continental eyes, Pacific peoples live in the largest danger zone in the world. Because of their familial attachment to both land and sea, Pacific Islanders know a solidarity of geography and culture. Despite their diversity, they are all island peoples and struggle with larger predatory powers. Pacific solidarity then has been formed in the teeth of First World aggression or aggression by regional powers such as Indonesia that are supported by First World institutions such as the World Bank and the American government. I'm going to wrap the reading up there. It is an amazing chapter. It's a fantastic chapter and it's an amazing book, and I thoroughly recommend it for everybody. But I just really wanted to wrap it up there because it speaks about our strength in our solidarity as island nations, which we all are, and as Te Moana Nui Akiwa whanaunga, which we all are. And I still firmly believe that we can take on these international institutions, even the first world institutions like the World Bank and the American government. So that's our reading for tonight. Now, we have, one of you's ready?
Oh, what are we doing?
I don't know. Whatever you want to do.
I was thinking of a poem that I've written.
We're really, really lucky to have the amazingly talented Moana Nui Akiwa whanaunga and sister, Carlo Mila, Carlo and I, and also you would have seen earlier, Dale Takitimu is here as well. We're having a sisterhood weekend, which is a really important thing to do, to treat yourselves, your sisters that you value. And so, but Carlo and I have recently been working on a digital exhibition called Manawana. And if you go to, or if you Google Digital Ocean, Manawana or Digital Ocean, you should be able to find the website for our pieces. Carlo has a stunning piece in there that she did with Michael. Is it Michael?
Tuffery.
Yeah, but is it pronounced Michael?
No,
it's Michael,
It's
just spelled though. I just checked. I thought I'd check because we all say Michael, but when you look at the spellings, anyway. Carlo and Michael Tuffery did an amazing piece called Manawana Meditation. It's an open-eyed meditation, and I've listened to it so many times. especially when I'm around water. It's amazing. And we have an artwork in there as well called I Am Hine, I Am Moana, that was filmed where we come from at Wharekahika with the lovely and talented and brilliant Te Ore Ore Ngātai Melbourne, and Terry Lee Crawford, Rebecca Crawford, another whanaunga of ours from Mawhakawa. And so they're doing the performance. Charles Brooks did the photography and filming, and I wrote the poem for that. And that's all about us as the moana and the amazing power of being wahine as well. So are you ready with your?
Yeah, totally.
Without further ado, I'm going to welcome tonight's first special guest, Carlo Miller.
Okay, so what Tina didn't say is that we all bought kimono today, and we were like double dared to wear them. So I'm wearing mine. Yeah, I spent some time in Hawaii, so I'm really feeling Haunani K. Trask's words, but I whakapapa te tonga, and so I am going to read a poem called A Tongan Reflection on Tino Rangatiratanga. And this kind of poem came about because, I was complaining kind of with my blue eyes, that's what I call them, when you look from how you've been socialized in New Zealand, and I was like moaning about the Tongan government and corrupt and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, hey, at least we are doing it to ourselves. And I was like, that is such a bloody good point, actually. And so this poem is called, A Tongan Reflection on Tino Rangatiratanga. I remember I used to feel shame when someone made fun of my king. Knickerbockers, aping European royalty, they said. The heavy crowns on sweating brown brows, the ermine trimming in stifling heat, the titles of chamberlain, barons, and nobles. I used to feel shame. I did not realize at the time the power of mimic as a strategy of resistance, the power of forcing someone to recognize power because it is wearing the same clothes and has a written constitution. I did not realize the power of forcing power to see power instead of savages ripe for the colonizing. Even today, it is illegal for a Tongan to walk shirtless in public. The paranoia of King George I, the genuine worry that foreign ships would land and take things into their own hands, put down their flag and take over. As preposterous as it now seems then, it was the done thing. A king who fully tattooed, and legend has it everywhere on his body, who outlawed te tau, wiped it out in one generation to secure an image to keep us secure. I did not realize that it was a strategy, erasing symbols and structures seen as savage and appropriating structures and symbols power could recognize as power. Now, when there is some snide remark about coronations or knickerbockers or kings in inverted commas or lowercase caps, I wonder what they would prefer. A king who serves cocktails in an island shirt, plays the ukulele on a fantasy island, deplane, ensures the guest houses are air-conditioned, serves sashimi with fresh mango. We're eating sashimi right now, just saying. With girls in grass skirts, swaying in coconut bras. Come and eat, relax. Welcome to paradise. Take a load off. Come for a ride on my royal golf cart. Would that be more to your liking? Well, piss off with what you think our leadership should look like. For all of its faults, this is tino rangatiratanga manifest by hook or by crook, by copycat or mimic. The Knickerbockers are a part of how we resisted you. Shame. Yeah, so that's my little contribution. Yeah, I kind of like it. People did mock us, and I did feel shame. And to understand actually how we managed to stay sovereign in a context of an entire region being colonized, essentially, was, yeah, it was quite empowering. I suppose it was the opposite of feeling shame. Having said that, Hawaii did exactly the same thing. Hawaii mimicked that power, had a royal family, had palaces and all the rest of it, but they still got done over. They were recognised by other royal families because it was kind of a bit of a strategy. Tonga wasn't recognised by Britain, and then they managed to be recognised by the French, and then because the French had recognised them, it forced Britain to. So like they were kind of playing these empire games, I suppose, like the real Star Wars. But in Hawaii, I think their resources were just so super luxe. It was so well positioned. It was so much bigger than a place like Tonga. With it was strategically just very, very irresistible and beautiful, beautiful, huge country. And that strategy of mimic didn't work because basically the Americans settlers just took it over completely illegally. So what do? It's still occupied illegally, and no one's really willing to do anything about that. Shall I hand over now?
Sure.
Yeah. Does someone else want to have a bit of a kōrero? I feel like now that I've done my poem. What was that?
Keep talking. No, look at my head.
Keep talking. I could hand.
Keep talking.
You want me to keep talking? Okay, all right. I'll read another poem, eh?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because they're all eating sashimi, I'm just saying. And they're out, like, so the rest of the crew is at countdown. Just
Okay.
you guys didn't need to know that, but yeah. So since we're on the kaupapa of Tonga and Tongan leadership, I might read another. Oh no, but this one's really depressing. It's about shit leadership, which essentially, maybe I just don't want to go there. And it's about the Princess Ashika and what happened.
Read it, Bill, so we can learn something new.
Oh, it's so sad. Like it's incredibly sad. So many people died, and it was just poor leadership. It's gonna make me sad, and I want to like feel happy tonight. Maybe I could read something about Hawaii. Yes, I will, and that's a little bit more uplifting. I just have to scroll through my phone. So I'm reading from The Goddess Muscle, which is going to be released very shortly. Yeah. Yeah.
The Goddess Muscle.
It's going to be released in October. So yeah, it's over 300 pages. So that's why that's why it's taking me a while to scroll.
300 pages.
Yeah, and I cut like about 150 pages. So it's
You cut 150.
yeah, I had to because it was just going to be so expensive. It's filled with color and kinds of things. So I am looking
Amazing.
for.
Should be able to write like that. What am I trying to wear? Which one?
It's interesting actually. I got the students in Hawaii to do this poetry exercise around you kind of smell, look, taste, see. It's kind of like a 5 sense exercise to make a poem, and it was really interesting to me. Which, sorry, it's taken me forever to find it. What they saw, it was so different from what tourists see, I suppose. And I could, when I finally get there, I'm scrolling on my phone and it's not ideal. There are a lot of love poems in this collection, like a lot. Not gonna lie. Here we are, yay! All right. Yeah, I'm gonna start with what the students said, which was a poem about what, like, I guess it was a class of Indigenous Hawaiians, what they saw. It's called What the Students Said, Oahu 313. I asked the students of West Oahu to tell me about their island, what they see, hear, taste, smell, feel. Loud, busy, noisy, they said. The palm trees are fake. Construction is in the air everywhere, potholes at the end of every rainbow. They told me how the military is spamming the land with their sweaty, stinky spy stuff. They spoke of sitting in the car for 2 hours to get into town, the time consuming of laid back and lazy. They told me of imported ginger lei woven by nimble Filipino fingers trapping tourists. Airports chanting artificial welcomes. There is no aloha to be found in the 7 shallow pools of the Hilton Hawaiian village. They spoke of how sweetness is found in their food, poke, lilikoi, shave ice, King's Hawaiian sweetbread. Not one of them mentioned a beach. Just to like roll on from what Haunani was talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, Nani.
Yeah. And you know what I've always thought? Like, you know, when she writes about lovely hula hands, our equivalent is haka.
Yeah.
You know, the way that people think, the way that they've characterized our kanaka Māori whānau is there to be lovely and graceful and supine and compliant. And for us, the flip of that is you will haka, you will perform.
The size.
And also
and
and the whole warrior gene thing that goes along with
You
it.
can hear her, right? I hope you can hear
I
her
think,
because
yeah.
I was just
I
thinking.
was just saying, it's the same for us, but the warrior gene, and not the lovely hula hands, but the haka, you will haka, all of that. But similar, just the way that they try to characterize us and make us into these really one-dimensional characters to fit into their play and their ideas of what we look like, but also it helps to commodify us, to unitize us, turn us into units and move us around and have us be a part. So I was just reflecting on that.
No. I'm glad you are. So the poem actually that I'm going to read, because it's right in front of me, and I kind of like this poem, and it reminds me of going there. Have you guys been to Kukaniloko? Kukaniloko. It's the birthing stones.
Yes, the birthing stones.
It's like amazing, right? So it's an incredible sacred site, and yet because Hawaii is Hawaii, it's just filled with tourists. Yeah. It's so anger invoking to see this incredibly sacred site just flooded with tourists. And so this is a little bit so Kukaniloko means anchoring the cry from within. So here we go. We are visiting Kukaniloko. Me, my mother, Mehana, and my boys asleep in the car. We walk down the red earth road. I am barefoot, soaking up everything I can. We approach the 2 upstanding ancestors in the form of rocks, swathed in light. We stop talking. We feel that thickness appear in the air, particles getting glutinous, something else is there, remembering, breathing, being, belonging in a way that you might interrupt whatever it is, whoever they are, that which cannot easily be known. Kapu, you can feel it. Mehana stands at the feet of the 2 who face towards the light. We wait for the tourists to walk past, and she begins, teacher of chants, chanting, enchanting the ancestors, awakening them intentionally to our presence. We dare to be here. We acknowledge you. Mehana turns her genealogy into the shape of words, spoken name after name, so they know who and how and why. I am grateful to be safe under her mantle. We approach what Martha has already dreamed out loud for me, stones arranged already in my imagination, a poem already birthed out of wonder. Here we are. Mehana ushers the bottoms of Japanese girls off the rocks. Sorry. Later, we gather the fruit, the lei, the money, the offerings. We strip the boulders clean. It's not our way, Mehana explains. They are just showing their love, wanting to be part of the mystery that is us and not us. Poem in hands, I wonder if my words are worthy. We sit under a tree, watch tourists come and go. Mehana has a knack of repelling them. They just knew. We spend a long time looking at the deep dip in the mountain range where the sun sets in V-necked glory, golden citrine at the throat of that mauna. Stunning. Mehana speaks about how the military are the only ones allowed over the triangular dip, the one way through the mountains. And as if on cue, helicopters buzz like black mosquitoes overhead. She tells me Maui was born in Waitanai. I believe her. Where else would he be from? A woman walks up with her boys. Mehana, it's me, Emma. And they begin to olelo Hawaii. It is beautiful. I stand and catch fragments of its fluent echo, nod my heads at the pieces I can piece together. I read them the poem. It does not feel bad. It is a remembering. It is a ritual. It is an offering that does not need to be cleaned off the rocks. They continue to olelo Hawaii. This, then, perhaps, is the revolution, to keep on being ourselves in a world that is doing everything it can to change us.
Oh. Oh. Mahalo.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
I'll say aloha. Beautiful, sister. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Exquisite.
Oh, well, since I'm sitting here, but this is the last thing, and then I'll pass over. Do you want me to read the poem that I read to the rocks?
I just want to listen to you. I feel sorry for
Kate's Pie there at Countdown.
You can watch it later
Yeah.
on.
Okay. So, I met this amazing older woman called Martha who has dedicated her life to researching kukani loko in such a detailed way that apparently there's an app where you can look at what the night sky is doing like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So she's like plotting where the stars were in relation to these rocks, and just her it's just amazing the amount of knowledge. So she was explaining to me that these star transits will go past a place that's named Waiora of Kane, and there'll be a story about Kane doing something, and it's actually tracing the movements of star transits over these landmarks. And it was just so much knowledge. I was completely blown away, actually, and I was just like, we're such geniuses. How did our knowledge get so savaged? I just can't even understand a superpower kind of level of knowing. But anyway, so I wrote this poem and I read it there, and it's called Kukani Loko. Here, where the sky spills its starry secrets caught and clenched in the bouldered hands of knuckled rock. Here, where an earth compass centers the galaxy in the red navel of Oahu. Here, where softly spoken celestial signs are hushed and held in a quiet assembly of stones. Here, where a wa'a of stones sails the blood-red soil northwest towards the setting sun. Here, where Maui could have snared the sun, umbilical cords stretching and skylines connected to calendar stars, harnessing time and space to interpret the future of a generation. And I just need to stop and say that these birthing stones were where the Ali'i woman gave birth, and there's one particular stone which is called the Reckoning Stone, and they would watch the way the shadows fell on it when the baby was born to be able to determine its future as potentially one of the shining ones that might redeem and lead the people. And you weren't allowed to sit on the rocks, like, unless you were pure of heart. It was just like a terrible, terrible thing, but it was such a special place. Okay, so I'm going to go back to skylines connected to calendar stars, harnessing time and space to interpret the future of a generation. Here, where a compass rock is used to navigate the night and sail the black shining road of Kane, stepping stones into the dark waves of the undulating Po, anchored by 8 sun stations. Here, where a fire ring of ali'i burns upwards as the navel cords of destiny are cut. The big drums are beaten when the glowing ones return. I know, it's a freaking magical place.
It is a magical
It's
place.
hard to see these helicopters buzzing and these like tourists coming and sitting down on the rocks and
Similarly for Makaha, and they'd be the same at Makaha, just all of that and the exploding ordinances and the always hearing the booms and the
come and talk. Yeah.
Girl, you are the best poet.
I'm
the best.
Oh my gosh. It's pretty amazing. And thank you, Malo.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Hawaii is so like, it's just amazing. Special place.
Yeah, and just you really took me back there too. You know, back to the birthing stones, even back to Waianae. And I really do miss our kanaka whānau. Like usually we would have had some of them over here by now, hosted them over here by this time of the year by now, and hung out, or and they're just so it's always amazing when we're able to join our voices together and our whānau and and Nanakuli, Waianae.
Yeah.
Just the heartiest place. Really reminded me of home, of the East Coast, really. And Ma'o Farms.
Oh my gosh, so I have a poem about Ma'o Farms.
Oh yeah.
Tell them about Ma'o Farms.
Ma'o Farms is this amazing social enterprise, and it was Eric Enos. Actually, if we go back a little bit, there's a matua called Eric Enos, and he started a farm. I think I've been telling you about it too, because I wanted us to do something like that at home. We should have one.
We must.
Yeah. And so they started off actually with another farm, the parent farm, which was all about, and they, to understand where we're talking about, it's the densest population of Kanaka Māori in the Pacific, in the world. And it's also where the US, the occupier government, the US government dumps all of their waste, a whole heap of weaponry waste, toxic weaponry waste, as well as the waste from the islands and the tourism waste. It's also where they force and what will you call it, like corral the homeless populations as well. And so they have these tent cities on the beaches and whatnot, but that's also a place of incredible beauty and resilience and strength and earthiness and groundedness. And there are amazing wahitapu there where their tohunga would go to to call to their ancestors across the moana. They would go to call to the ancestors in Hawaii, in Hawaii Nui, and places where they, some of the pools that they would go to, and also the birthplace of Maui as well. So they believe Maui was born from Hina as well, but also on Oahu, there's the birthplace of Hina there as well. And so we had some amazing experiences there with our ohana, and I really miss them deeply. But these farms, the first one, the parent farm, was started by Matua Eric Enos, and they fought for decades to get this land back. He was a teacher. I hope I get this story right. The Kazi Kamwela, I'll tag him and he can correct us underneath the chat if I need to be corrected. But as I recall, his father, Matua Eric, was a teacher at the time, and he used to take a lot of the students and youth of that area in these walks up into the Ngāhera, up into the hills, and they started to come across remnants of their old papakainga from their tipuna days, and the kalo patches and the aquaculture, and the remnants of what they used to do. And they used to feed out of that valley. They used to feed all of their and so he decided that they were going to reclaim it, but also restore it. And that was a huge battle that placed them directly in harm's pathway with racists and against the government as well. But they got it. They got this land back. And then so they started to build these established organic farms and utilize the local laws, which said that if you get organic status, people can't dump toxic material within a 5-mile radius around where your farm is established. So they gradually bought up the land and expanded their farm out and started to push all of the toxic dumping activity out of their valley that way. And they also used that farm to help their people heal. So people who are going through addiction issues in particular, they come there and they work on the farm, and they heal and they produce kai. Now Ma'o is a progression from that, another farm, and a different farm but related to it, same whānau, and amazing people who are leading that out as well. In fact, one of the farm managers is a graduate from the program of that farm. And Ma'o is an organic farm that where youth, again, from that community are able to work on the farm. They earn a stipend. They do so many hours a week, and they get to get their tuition fees paid for to be able to get qualifications for in a range of different qualifications, but chiefly farming and working in primary industries. But when you talk to them, they're really clear that everybody needs to grow up, everybody needs to have this experience, everybody needs to be educated in the Mara. And so they also derive an income by selling their organic produce to the restaurants and places in town, and also at the markets. Really inspirational. They have, I understand, had 50 graduates come through their program at least. It might have been a year or two ago that it was 50, so it's probably more than that now. So I know a lot of our Māori Kazis have gone over there and been really inspired by what they do. So Oahu has a really special place in my heart. Hawaii, all of Hawaii, ngā moku o Hawaii have a special place in our hearts. And also, for us on the East Cape, in Matakawa, our nanny, Huturangi, the wife of Paikea, her father, Whiro, came over here on Nukutere, and the kōrero goes that he is this, that Hilo is Whiro, and that's the same person, and that's where that waka left from. So we have whakapapa connections to Hawaii Nui as well. Anyway, just some reflection. So I just wanted to think, just lovely to be thinking about Honani Trask and the gifts that she's left us, for our political considerations and conscientization, and then what a beautiful way to honor that also with these poems from Carlo. So mahalo, sister. Thank you again. And so I'm going to invite our next special guest up now, another kazi, no te tairawhiti, no te whānau apanui, no Ngāti Horowai hoki, one of our Te o Paipa kazis from Te Horo, Reporua, and Te Whānau apanui, get her as well.
Are you allowed to swear on there?
Yeah, you can swear on here. I swear all the time. So
There's swear words in my one.
you do you.
Yay.
Oh.
Messenger video. Messenger video.
I'm turning. That's Annie.
Oh, sorry. Someone get on his name.
No, that's Annie.
Yeah.
That's all right. All right. Dale Takitimu, ladies and gentlemen.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora whānau. Ai, ko Dale Takitimu ahau, he mokopuna ahau no te tairawhiti. So just mahia to all of you that are listening. I just quickly asked Tina if you're allowed to swear on here because the poem that I was going to draw on tonight, partly because it's been a spontaneous sort of on the spot kind of day. So I've just quickly trawled through what's on my phone. And I thought I'd give some context around that. And maybe you can start to see the connect between the reading that Tina gave and some of the reflections Carlo has given tonight and some of the background that led to the writing of this poem. It's loosely called a poem. It was, in fact, an emotional vent. So in this world that we find ourselves, this generation that we find ourselves born into at the moment, it has been 180 years in this country since the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which was a pact signed between some of our tipuna, some of our ancestors, and the British Crown. And that pact, in fact, acknowledged and protected our right to self-govern and to self-determination. It was written in the words of 1840, so it didn't use the same words as we find in international political speak now, but it certainly reflected our ability to protect our territorial integrity as tribal peoples and our way of life. During the COVID lockdown, and for many years I've acted as a negotiator for my tribal group, Te Whānau Apanui, in its interrelationship with the Crown, and really trying to get them to the mark of honourably implementing Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We're a long way from that mark on a daily basis. But we do try. We do try to sit at the table as well as outside the table and hold them to account. So during the course of some of that business this year, I was at the table with a whole lot of Indigenous lawyers, of which I'm one, and a whole lot of Crown officials to try and build some treaty protections into the COVID legislation that was being passed under urgency by the Parliament here in New Zealand. So, what I was doing at the table was trying to ensure that legislation passed under urgency didn't ride completely roughshod over the rights and interests of our Indigenous peoples, and also compromise the entitlements of our mokopuna. And it was really a protective stance. It was trying to get this legislation to do as little harm as possible. And so we worked through the days and the nights of the COVID lockdown to draft up legislative provisions that would be included into that legislation to form those protections. And there's a lot of toing and froing. It was a frustrating exercise and frustration. And we did get a whole lot of stuff over the line into the final draft, or what we thought was the final draft of the legislation. And at the last moment, just as that was about to be passed into law, they pulled out all of the protections for our treaty, and therefore made it a lot weaker and made our people and our tribal estates a whole lot more vulnerable. And this was a little bit of my reaction to that backtracking by the Crown, which is not unusual, but it just still smarts when it happens. We did, as a good news sort of ending to this, so I wrote this poem or this event in the middle of that, but the good news sort of ending to it is there was able to be some trading behind in the corridors of power, by which those treaty protections were put back into the legislation. So I'm just going to kick that off now. We've got a few more of the sisterhood just arriving into the house. Kia ora. So I'll kick off this offering, noting, of course, that Carlo is the poet amongst us, and this is a hack job by comparison. So this was me at 11:15 on June the 30th this year, and I was, safe to say, in a very pissed off mood. So there is some swearing. If you're sensitive about that, hold on to your hats. They've horse traded our treaty again in the back corridors of power, told us the pandemic made them do it. They do it so easily now there's not even a noise. We're just so used to getting colonially fucked every time they find an excuse to throw our rights out the door. Like a field worker who forgot they got no right to be in the big house. Stuck in their great white savior complex, tried to convince us of the civilization lies, of how grateful we should be, of how consensual it was to be an oppressed underclass on our own ancestral lands. Fuck, can you hear her weeping for us? And you know what petty fucking distraction pisses me off? My pride. It's what little I've got left. Behind closed doors, they're actually thick as pig shit and seem too inept to even colonize competently. We've learnt their game, outplay them at times, but we're constantly reminded no matter how close victory looks, we don't own the pieces and we don't own the board. It is the shadow of the land that remains. But then it doesn't matter, if you also make all the rules. Just shift the game to suit yourselves and shrug your shoulders because you got no answer for me when I have to go home and tell our mokopuna their ancestral rights got fucked again because Becky or Katie or fucking Susie with a Y felt the mood wasn't quite there and she didn't think her faceless Trumpolian minister would understand the point we were trying to make. You know that pretty fucking clear point that's been on parchment since 14th of June 1840 that says full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of their lands, forests, fisheries, kainga and all other taonga for as long as they shall wish to retain them. And yes, we wish to fucking retain them. Is that the point your shit for brains minister don't understand? No answer. No answer. Just shrug. Just shrug off my treaty rights. Just rolled off your shoulder and onto some parliamentary shagpile rug like a piece of native fluff the land-grabbing Hoover didn't catch. It's laughable how easily they pull this shit off time and time again and fucking smile at us and say it's the spirit of partnership. where we're here to fuck your right to self-determination, but occasionally ask if you'd like lube. Your 30 pieces of silver for every pound of our flesh. It's really only the military that keep you there, as you remind us in Te Uruwera, in the Raukumara, of Mahia, in Waitangi, and your indoctrination of our previously mātauranga rich minds, replaced by your imposed Pythagoras theorem and your 3 bloody blind mice. So, Quena. So that was Angry Dale. And like I said, the good news sort of outcome of that is that we did manage to get those treaty provisions put back in at the last minute, but we know from history and our experience that we will have to hold their feet to the fire every step of the way to make those provisions actually be honourably implemented in real life, and that's the next challenge ahead of us. So with that in mind, we got no time to rest, no time to sleep. Colonisation does not sleep, and that's a salient point in New Zealand. We've had Crown law as an institution set up since 1856, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, its brief is to protect the parliamentary supremacy of the government of the Crown. And we are constantly fighting up against that. So while it looks like we're having a rest and big drinkies, what we're actually doing is topping ourselves up for the next round. And we know the self-care is important because we need to sometimes just pull out all the plugs and have some time to replenish our souls. So that's what we're doing. And with that, see hey Mauri ora.
Yay! Self-care is a radical act. Self-care is a radical act. Self-love is a radical act when everything around you tells you you're not worth it. So, Tita Ani just arrived as well from Wharekahika, Ani and Alu. Yeah, we're having a blessed sisterhood weekend. Okay, so we're going to wind it up because that's about an hour. This is the longest reading Nook we've had. But thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Do look after yourselves and top yourselves up, just as we've chosen to top ourselves up this weekend. And the hardest of acts to follow, but feels appropriate too. It's so hard. Not even a scratch on the surface. Please don't get your hopes up. Not even a scratch on the surface of what you just did. Yeah. Oh, well, good way to close us off, because this has really been an evening of wahine energy. Amazing. From Honani K. Trask to Carlo Mila and Dale Takitimu. The amazing Tui Woman Hoven.
Who's just been making our drinks.
Who's been making our drinks and getting our kai ready. And yes, you can come and sing a song now. Come and sing a song now. No, on here now.
After your poem.
After my poem? Okay. It's just getting better.
Is your one downstairs?
They're both on the end of the bed. Yeah. Okay, so it's the piece from our Manawana exhibition. Because because this is such beautiful wahine energy tonight. And this is all about our moana and all about wahine. It's called I Am Hine. I am hine. I am whenua. I am moana. Between my thighs is life. I have birthed lands and gods and generations of ancestors. I birth change. I birth growth. Between my thighs is death. I am the last wail before your longest night. I am the cold embrace. I am the final word. gates. I open channels beyond the veil. I welcome the unseen and shift the space between us. I am Hine. I pull the tides within you. I command hordes. I bring war. I bring peace. I calm the gods. I bring release. I fed you from these breasts, which your book of men's rules bade I cover. Well, just remember your aging grey hairs came from where? Know this, I was always here. These clicking tongues erased my names even as they dictated their own demise. So don't you come along and think you save me. Recognize your life depends upon me. Understand your future lies within me. Realize your fate rests with me. I am Hine. I am Whenua. I am Moana.
Whoa, that's amazing. Wow, in person, it's next level. Wow.
On the exhibition, that's a part of the Manawana. But Tioriori. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we have a waiata up next from Tui Aroha Womanhoven. Sister whose back I will have i te ao, i te pō, i te mutunga o te ao. We got each other's backs. We've been through a lot together. Back to back, my sister. Hey, Akui.
Okay. So this little ditty I'm going to sing is Tēnā Anō. I actually learnt it in my adult class last week. And it's very significant for me because it was composed by a tipuna named Rawenia Te Aungira. I know. Yes, so Rawenia Te Aungira was a tipuna of the Ngāti Upohatu tribe, of which we all descend. And it goes like this. First of all, I'll tell you what it means. So, it basically talks first about the fronds of the harakeke of the flax plant, and the tipuna fronds, or the grandparents, can be severed. And then it goes on to say that the tipuna aroha, the tipuna of love, endures forever. I think that's the translation.
Yeah.
So it goes like this. He tipuna harakeke kataya te wete. He tipuna o te aroha mauanai. And there you have it.
Oh.
That's the kinaki. To all the wonderful kōrero that was woven by my sister and my brilliant, special, creative, clever sisters here tonight. I'm so blessed to be around. Thank you so much. And poor Māori.
Ko Māori whānau. Thanks for joining. Have a lovely weekend. We certainly will. Ko Māori.